Sergei Pavlovich versus Curtis Blaydes, Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush, and many other big fights have recently been made by the UFC, and I'm going to talk about all of them in today's MMA news reaction video, starting with the freshest of the fight announcements, which is Sergei Pavlovich versus Curtis Blaydes, a massive, massive heavyweight fight, number 3 versus number 4. The winner of this has got to get a title shot, or maybe, depending on how that Jones versus Garn fight goes. I know Jones wants Stipe Miocic next. Maybe they can be the short notice replacement opponent, which will guarantee them a title shot in the future. So regardless, the winner of this has got to get a title shot. Massive matchup. Amazing fight. We kind of saw it coming because they've been talking about this for a while. There's been a couple of hints and rumors here and there. It makes absolute sense to do this fight next. And respect to both of these heavyweights, because these are the no-nonsense heavyweights, in my opinion. Curtis Blaydes does not get enough respect. I can't believe fighters like Jorge Masvidal, who pick and choose and whine about not getting a title shot and want a one-fight win streak to get a title shot, get given a BMF belt just because they sucker punched some guy like a coward after losing a fight and used to fight on the street growing up. A lot of people fight on the street growing up. Well done, Masvidal. Yours were recorded by Kimbo Slice. Rest in peace. Either way, speaking of Kimbo Slice, someone who looks quite like him, Curtis Blaydes, that beard is getting out of control. He's a savage. He's the real BMF of the heavyweight division. Any upcoming contender, he's like, cool, sign me up. That's been how it's been for Curtis Blaydes throughout his entire career. I'm not just saying recently. With he took on Tom Aspinall when he was a rising contender in London as well in the main event. He goes to London. Massive respect for Curtis Blaydes. He's been like this for a long time. When Ngannou was the scary up-and-comer in the heavyweight division, before people have even heard of him, Curtis Blaydes was the guy saying, I'll take it. I'll take on Ngannou. Anything to get in there. Anything to better my position in the heavyweight division. He fought Ngannou twice. You know what I mean? One in Beijing, I believe it was, in China. Like, it's just, this guy does not really ask questions about who he's taking on next, and he could easily sit there and be like a Colby Covington and sit just outside the title range and whine and complain and not want to do anything and want to win one fight and then get his title shot back and be that Masvidal-esque fighter, or do what Gaethje does, win one fight, sit out for a year until the champion has no fresh matchups, and then just be the guy that gets offered to the champion. But Curtis Blaydes stays active, gets back in there, and Sergei Pavlovich is a great matchup. Respect to him as well. Staying very active, getting right back in there. He's got a ton of momentum right now. 2 massive finishes back-to-back. Derek Lewis, I'm running out of air. Derek Lewis, Taito Ivasa, back-to-back. I believe both of them under 60 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. And interesting stuff. April 22nd main event. I'm going to go with Curtis Blaydes. I think he's more well-rounded out of the two of them. That's my honest opinion about this matchup. He's way more well-rounded out of the two of them. Way more well-rounded. And I feel like he can get this one done. The takedown threat. Of course, we talk about Sergei Pavlovich destroying Taito Ivasa and destroying Derek Lewis as well. You know, those guys are pretty great matchups for him, which is why I picked Sergei Pavlovich to beat those two fighters. And you've also got to consider, you know, with his first win over Derek Lewis was recently coming off of some damage, and I was like, why is he taking on Pavlovich after taking some damage? This doesn't really make any sense. This is a bad matchup for him. I really don't see this one going well for Derek Lewis. And then what do you know? Sergei Pavlovich sits outside of range and just beats him badly in the first round. I know some people will say early stoppage and this and that, but the fact is Sergei Pavlovich took on Derek Lewis not long after he got KO'd by Taito Ivasa. The fight was even supposed to happen a little bit earlier anyway. And then you look at the Taito Ivasa fight, similar situation. He just took a ton of damage off of Cyril Gane, turned right back around to fight Sergei Pavlovich, and also Lewis and Tuivasa aren't going to shoot takedowns. And one person who has beaten Sergei Pavlovich in his career is Alistair Overeem, and he did it by getting a takedown. In the clinch, he swept Sergei Pavlovich to the ground. Fair play, it was a younger Sergei Pavlovich who was making his debut in the UFC. However, Overeem survived him, which is already a little bit sus, and then swept him to the ground and beat him badly on the ground to a first round TKO win. It was not good for Sergei Pavlovich in that fight. Not good whatsoever. So you've got a guy in Curtis Blaydes who's the one who ragdolled Overeem and beat him up on the ground. There's always been a little bit of that hole in the ground game, in the grappling game of Sergei Pavlovich. And you even look at when he fights Shamil Abdurakhimov or some other heavyweights. It takes him a little bit longer when there's that takedown threat. I'm not saying Shamil Abdurakhimov in any way is better than Derek Lewis or Taito Tuivasa. Don't believe that for 1 second. But he has a bit of a threat that Pavlovich has to worry about, which is the takedown threat, which is why he opted for an uppercut to finish the job against Shamil Abdurakhimov eventually at the end of the first round. But he made him fight very differently. He was on the back foot, he was very hesitant, he was feinting a bunch, he didn't just steam across the cage knowing that this guy wants to scrap with him like Derek Lewis and Taito Tuivasa and just go hell for leather and start swinging shots and win because of that. I think this is a bad matchup for Sergei Pavlovich. I've always thought this is one of the worst matchups for him, and also for Curtis Blaydes, he's not just a wrestler. You know what I mean? He's not just a wrestler. He's got hands now as well to worry about. That's the problem with Curtis Blaydes. I still think Tom Aspinall has the best chance of beating him in the heavyweight division. Because otherwise he's going to be a problem. Maybe like the bigger version of Alexander Volkov with better takedown defense would have a good chance against Curtis Blaydes as well. But he's got the grappling to worry about, the knockout power to worry about as well. He's got good conditioning. He's been 5 rounds many times before. He's got experience. You know what I mean? I know it didn't look good, but he was a heavyweight and he went 5 rounds with Alexander Volkov. He's got that experience in the bank. He's been to the decision in a 3-rounder a few times as well in his career. I think he can do this against Pavlovich, and I think he can get a first-round TKO to ground and pound over him as well, because something else I wanted to bring up here, Curtis Blaydes has such a good chin. I know he's been KO'd. And, you know, Derek Lewis landed a flush uppercut on him, and people are going to say, oh, you got KO'd by Derek Lewis. But there's so many shots I've seen Curtis Blaydes get hit by, and he takes them well. He really does take shots well. He got hit by Dorcas a couple of times. Dorcas is a fat welterweight, so I'm not saying that's anything to worry about in terms of power. But, you know, when you look at he got hit by Rosenstruik, and Rosenstruik will sleep a guy real quick. Sleep him really quickly in a fight. And he beat him pretty impressively. Not too impressively, but he was able to do what he needed to do to win. And he took good shots. He took great shots off Junior Dos Santos. He took big shots off of Ngannou as well. He was one of the only guys who, at the end of the Ngannou TKO, he was up on his feet protesting the stoppage. Most guys don't have the ability to do that when they get finished by Ngannou. They're flat on the ground snoozing. You know what I mean? But Curtis Blaydes in the first fight with Ngannou was the one who was actually on his way to winning that fight before his eye swelled up too bad to continue. And then you look at the second fight, he takes shots well. So I think there's opportunity for him here, even if he does get clipped by a big shot early on. I'm going to go with Curtis Blaydes winning this fight. It's an amazing fight, main event of a fight night, April 22nd. And I think Blaydes is going to win. And if he does, his next fight has to be a title shot. Don't know when. It has to be a title shot, though. You've got to restore some order into the heavyweight division. You can't have Jones just picking and choosing what he wants and stalling the division out if he does win. If Gane wins, much better for Curtis Blaydes. He can get an immediate title shot next. But we've got Pavlovich Blaydes, April 22nd. I want to read you this card because it's so amazing. Pavlovich Blaydes, Green versus Gordon. Song Yudong, Ricky Simone. Brad Tavares, Bruno Silva. Like, this card is looking so stacked. March, April, May. Hey, I'm here for it. I'm going to be making content on it. These cards are what I'm talking about. We've been through a January and February drought, and now hopefully March and April is the Sahara on the horizon. You know what I mean? I'm looking forward to it. It almost feels like a mirage. Like I've been in the desert, wading through the sandstorm that was Blanchfield versus Andrade. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, is that Holloway Allen in the main event of a fight night on the horizon? No, it can't be. And it sort of like fades away. It's almost too good to be true on the horizon of the UFC. We move on, though, to another bit of news, which is Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush being official for the co-main event of UFC 288, I believe in May. I love it. Apparently, it's the co-main event. It might not be by the time the fight card comes around, because I'm assuming Nunes or Zhang Weili is going to want to be on that card somewhere around that time. Maybe they'll do it in June. Who knows? But I'm looking forward to this. Oliveira versus Dariush, a massive matchup in the lightweight division. Early read on who people are picking. Majority Dariush, 55%. I'm leaning that way. I'm worried. I need to rewatch a few fights before I give my ultimate prediction, but I'm swaying. Originally, I thought Charles Oliveira could win. Now I'm leaning Dariush a little bit, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to flip-flop a few times on this fight. But I will do way more research into that Gamrot fight, because I know Dariush was out scrambling him, but Gamrot's a guy who's not going to take the back. You know what I mean? He's not really an opportunist grappler. He'll just sort of grind you out with that pace like Colby Covington. Whereas, you know, Charles Oliveira is a bit more of an Aljo for the division in comparison. You know? It feels that way. So I feel like Gamrot's sort of the Marab of the lightweight division, whereas Oliveira's the Aljamain Sterling, where sure they can both out-grapple you, maybe, but one of them's going to have an ability to pounce on the back and finish you from those advantageous positions. And maybe if I look at it back, we'll see Dariush give up his back a few times against Gamrot, where a guy like Oliveira could have a chance. But I also think that Gamrot's entries in the grappling are a bit better than Charles Oliveira as well. So Oliveira's taken a lot of damage recently, man. I'm worried. And Dariush is still in that mode. Listen, Oliveira's made his money now. He's had his millions. Whereas Dariush still ain't got his yet. And that is a dangerous difference to have when it gets tough and both of you are rocked. It's a much better situation to be in if you're Beneil Dariush there. You know what I mean? He still hasn't got that money. He's been at his career so long. He's just up to that final hurdle. He's came back. He looked great against Gamrot. Gamrot's so dangerous. Beat Arman Tsarukyan. Weird decision, I know, but at least we can say he's like equal to the level of Arman Tsarukyan. And Beneil Dariush was able to beat him. That's crazy. That's a great win. I'd argue it's a better win than maybe like a Poirier or a Gaethje. I'll be real. I really do think so. Like Gaethje, I think there's going to be a massive shift in the lightweight division recently. So I'm actually leaning a bit towards Beneil Dariush. Oliveira's been dropped so many times in his recent bouts. So I'm going to lean towards Dariush winning. I might flip back because I'm a massive Oliveira fan. I might do some research and be like, oh, hang on. He might get the back in that position. Who knows? But we'll see how it goes. I'm going to go with Dariush as my early lean now that the fight has been made official. I've switched back a little bit the more I've thought about it. But I'm glad that this has been added to that May pay-per-view card. All we need now to make this May pay-per-view card amazing, because it doesn't have the strongest of main events. Sterling Cejudo is like, it's good, but it's not amazing as a main event. But it'll be a great build-up. They'll talk trash back and forth, you know what I mean? We also need now, we've got Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush. I don't know if we need Nunes versus Aldana as a backup title fight, because I think Aljo and Cejudo will stay in there. But if they do need that, they need that. But we also need Oliveira Dariush on there. I need like a Khamzat Chimaev, Robert Whittaker on that card as well. We can't waste that on a fight night. That's worth pay-per-view buys. You know what I mean? Chimaev is worth. Chimaev versus Whittaker, I would say, is worth, no joke, 200,000 pay-per-view buys. Maybe 150k on its own. You know? So put that on this card. It will add a lot of value to the card, especially as a 5-round co-main event, a co-main event in general. You could have Oliveira Dariush as the feature fight. It's already got Bryce Mitchell, Jonathan Pierce, but that could be the headliner of the prelims, in my opinion. It's not that huge of a fight. And then you've got also maybe a Paulo Costa, Sean Strickland. They're calling each other out for a fight night card in April. I say push that back a little bit. Do Brian Ortega, Ilia Topuria on a fight night main event in April. And then do Paulo Costa, Sean Strickland on this main card of this pay-per-view in UFC 288. So you can have that press conference between them. Imagine that. That would be absolutely amazing. Khamzat Chimaev, Paulo Costa, same press conference. Sean Strickland, Robert Whittaker, Henry Cejudo, Aljo, Oliveira Dariush, all on stage at a press conference. And then sprinkle in one decent fight that you can add in there as well. I don't know what it possibly could be. Maybe it'll be in this next amount of news. We move on to some other fights that have been announced. I'm just going to race through some of these because they're good fights, but I'm just going to give some early leans on them. We've had Marina Rodriguez versus Verna Jandiroba. I've got Marina Rodriguez. I think she wins this one. Jesus, someone said I'm over here, Verna, because of her wonky eye. But yeah, I'm leaning towards Marina Rodriguez. That's on UFC 288. That might be on the main card. I hope it isn't, but it might be. You know what I mean? We move on. Josh Quinlan versus Angelusa, April 29th fight night. I actually like Angelusa here. He's a very underrated fighter, and he's the only guy to take Jack Della Maddalena to a decision, and he looked good in that fight as well. I rewatched the Contender Series fight recently in the build-up to Randy Brown versus JDM, and he actually was competitive in that fight. JDM did way more damage, but Angelusa was there every step of the way, giving back, you know what I mean? So I think he's very underrated, and I think he'll beat Josh Quinlan, who's a little bit of a Contender Series newbie. We move on. Mackenzie Dern versus Angela Hill. I'm going to go with Dern getting a sub here. I think she will get Hill to the ground at some point and find that sub, but Great matchup. This has also been added to May 13th on a fight night card, so that's a great fight. We've got another good fight as well. Edmund Shabazian versus Anthony Hernandez, May 20th main event. Or no, main event, May 20th event. So now they're booking ahead of time to a much further card down the line. Don't know about you guys. This smells like disaster for Edmund Shabazian if I had to give an early lean. Anthony Hernandez, pace-setting grappler. Edmund Shabazian doesn't like grappling, gasses out when he grapples. I'm seeing this as a third-round TKO for Anthony Hernandez, to be honest with you. So if Edmund can win this, that's a true sign that he's massively improved. If he gets by this, and not where he gets a first-round KO, but if he wins a decision against Anthony Hernandez, that's what we need to see from Edmund before we're convinced that he's really turned around his career. Because in all fairness, Dalchalungiambula's just a muscled-up trash fighter, in all honesty, that swings haymakers like a lunatic. So if Edmund wins this one, by decision especially, he's back and he's a new, reinvented version of himself. But I think Anthony Hernandez has all of the tools to win this. And it's basically like, if you could pick an unranked fighter to beat Edmund Shabazian, you'd pick Anthony Hernandez, in my opinion. We move on to another fight up the card. Another fight that got announced for May 13th. Jake Matthews versus Gabe Green. I'm going to go with Jake Matthews here. Gabe Green's good, but he's a pace setter. And I don't think you can just beat Jake Matthews by a decision if you don't have that ability to splatter him and KO him. We saw Matthew Semmelsberger able to drop him multiple times. We've seen people try and get scrappy with Jake Matthews, and Brady was able to out-grapple him. But I don't think Gabe Green has the ability to out-grapple. I don't think he has the ability to knock down or knock out Jake Matthews. So I think it's going to be a scrappy fight, and Matthews will get the better of it, maybe by KO. Going to be a great fight, though. Kovalkiewicz versus Demopoulos. Who cares? Probably leaning towards Kovalkiewicz, but we'll see. And that's all of the fights that have been announced recently. Thank you for watching. I'm just going to double check right now to see if I'm missing any extra fights that have recently been made. Brian Barberena steps in against Gunnar Nelson at March in London. It was supposed to be Daniel Rodriguez. He pulled out. Now Brian Barberena is taking that fight at London. That London card is getting worse and worse by the week. And that's all of it. And Tatiana Suarez is moving down to strawweight after her win against Montana De La Rosa, and I picked her to be a 125-pound champ at the end of the year, so I look like an idiot. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Hope I covered everything. Goodbye.